I went and bought a rice cooker on the first day that I got there, and I just ate rice in my room and tried not to touch anything. I was so paranoid. The Comrades up record is 5:58, and I would really want to try and get as near to that record as possible. So I think on paper, I can run those paces. If you can run for 3 hours, you can run for 6 hours. And I don't think you need to do like crazy big volumes. It's just having the confidence that you can get through it.
Welcome back to 5 Miles Easy. Today we are literally all over the world. I am currently in Mallorca, Steph's back in London, and today's guest on the show is in South Africa. After debriefing on Steph's incredible race at Two Oceans last week, today we are joined by another Two Oceans legend and 5th place finisher, Carla Molinaro. Now, some of you may remember that Carla was actually on one of our very early 5 Miles Easy episodes, but she has had a storming year and has just done so much. So we cannot wait to catch up with her again, hear all about her Two Oceans experience and some of the other incredible things she's been up to.
Yeah, it was super fun getting to catch up with Carla, just because I was involved in a bit of her build up for the race, and it was just really interesting to hear her experience of Two Oceans, given we were in the same race, but you can have very different experiences of it. She's also just such an experienced ultra runner, so I was definitely absorbing all of her tips and knowledge just so I can better myself next time and just generally improve over the distance. And one of the things I found really interesting that she speaks about is she also felt cramp in her legs during the race, but she's used to that feeling now because it happens in so many races that she can almost just push through the pain. And whereas I was scared to push through it, thinking I wouldn't be able to finish the race, it was interesting that she's kind of like, shut up, legs, I'm just going to go anyway and just withstand it. So yeah, that was really interesting. She also shares loads of tips on general nutrition, just around her training, also during the race, and just the importance of strength and conditioning, and some tips on getting into ultramarathons and how you train for them and how it's different for marathon running, kind of depending on the distance of the ultra. So 50K all the way up to 100K distance. Very, very interesting conversation, but I'm really interested to see how she gets on for the rest of the year. Like you said, she's come off of some amazing races. So yeah, I'm really excited to see how she gets on at Comrades in a few weeks' time.
Yeah, I cannot wait as well. I know she's got some big goals for it, so it will be very exciting to see. But how is your recovery going after Two Oceans? You mentioned the cramp in your leg, which we did chat about a bit last week. So how have they come off that?
Yeah, so when we caught up, I think my quads were just in pieces, and I was doing a bit of jogging because I mentioned doing that actually did make them feel better, and every single day they were improving loads and loads. And I guess by the end of the first week, my legs actually felt great. I had a sports massage and that cured them completely. The day after that, I was like, wow, I don't really feel the race in my legs anymore in terms of soreness. I guess there's still a bit of fatigue. So then this week 2, I've just been easing myself back into not a completely normal week of training. Obviously, there's still recovery time that's needed, but just more of what looks like a normal week. So mimicking just the easy run days and then getting a bit of a session in, not super hard or anything like that, but just turning my legs over a bit, which has gone well so far. So yeah, I'm just very much listening to my body, making sure that I don't overdo it, but also if I'm recovered, then it's great to just kind of get back into a routine of it. So enjoying it. I think the hard thing is we probably mentioned before that when you don't know what you're training for, it's kind of when you do a session, you're kind of like, well, what's the point of this? I'm just doing it because that's what I'm used to, but I need to come up with a plan now of what I'm actually training for.
Have you got any idea what you want to do next? Any thoughts?
Well, definitely some shorter stuff over the summer, some 5 and 10K races I need to look at. My coach said to me the other day, he was like, so would you consider a track race? And probably before he finished that sentence, I said, no. And he said that was the most decisive he has ever heard me be in his life.
I would love to see that.
you know what? Ultimately, I'm trying to get better at the marathon distance and beyond, which is on the road. So for me, I'm like, if I don't enjoy track races, then what's the point? I may as well do road races. Yeah, just to get some speed back, and that should hopefully help me over the longer stuff. But I'm not sure about later in the year. Maybe a marathon, maybe something else. We will see. I will keep you updated. But what are you doing out in Mallorca? Very sunny there.
It is. Well, I was actually in Nice last weekend for a half marathon, which I'm not going to talk about too much now because I think we're going to do a bit of a deeper dive next week, because that was part of some very big news I received this week, that I am selected for Paris.
Oh my God.
So I still cannot believe it, and I'm absolutely on cloud nine, but I'm going to the Olympics.
Honestly, you just saying that, when you told me that news, I literally screamed out loud. I was like, yes! Oh, I just feel like, I mean, I know how much that means to you, but I feel like I've kind of closely been there on your journey, just witnessing it, and lots going on behind the scenes, which, yes, we will share more of in the next episode. But it was almost such a relief, but combined with excitement.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, and it's never a smooth journey. So I think the last few months have definitely been, I mean, it is naturally the biggest focus, and so much kind of emotional energy goes into that. So I was obviously over the moon, but I think relief was a big emotion that I felt as well. So I am now in Mallorca on a bit of a holiday, but also just a nice way to kick off my new training block. I've actually got a pretty easy week this week, to be honest. Just to, obviously, I raced at the weekend and have a bit of a de-stress, just relax, reset. But yeah, it's just really nice to do some running along the seafront. For the listeners who are watching on YouTube, I can only apologise for my appearance because I've literally just finished my first kind of little session back. And then, yeah, it is warm. I literally jumped in the sea, which is why I look wet.
Oh, no, I'm so jealous. There is nothing better than finishing a session in the sea.
Oh, it is the dream, isn't it?
Well, I'm so excited to hear more about it because, like you said, we're not going to go into too much detail now, but next episode we will do a very big download on what you've been doing the last few months, because I feel like we've kind of kept things quite quiet in terms of what you've been up to and what your plans are for the marathon block over the next few months.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm really excited to actually share some of the behind the scenes now, because as you said, we haven't really been able to share that much in the build up, mainly because I obviously have not known whether I would be selected and what's going on. So it would be really good to share some of that. And there are ups, downs, highs, lows. It has been a bit of a stressful few months, but in a very good way. And obviously now I cannot wait to start training for Paris, but it's going to be a big challenge because the course is really difficult. So I'll talk a bit about that as well, and how I'm going to prepare for a very different kind of race.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Well, congratulations again. And yeah, just looking forward to hearing more about it.
Right, shall we crack on with this week's show?
Let's do it. Carla, thank you so much for joining 5 Miles Easy for the second time. Last time we spoke to you, you just finished an amazing race at Comrades Marathon where you'd finished 3rd place. You have then since gone on to win the 50k World Champs, and just a few days ago you came 5th in a very competitive race at Two Oceans Marathon. So there's loads to delve into today. But last time you were on, we didn't get to ask you the question, what is your why when it comes to running?
I just really love running. I just enjoy being out there running with my friends and taking in the scenery. So for me, it's more about that, not really anything else.
Yeah, and I think that's so great, because I was talking to someone about this the other day, that I feel really lucky that I genuinely enjoy running. I don't think everyone actually loves running. You know, there's other whys of being competitive, but I think, for example, after a big race, it's so nice to have those days where you actually just want to run because you love running, rather than putting the pressure on yourself of I need to perform. It's just so nice to be out.
Yeah, I almost find like the performance side of it is a byproduct of it, which is like a nice add-on. But yeah, I agree. Like some people, I don't think actually enjoy it, but then that baffles me at why they do it, because there's literally 20 million other sports that you could do instead, which is more fun.
Yeah, of course. And it's just such a big motivator to keep going. And I assume, your love for running has taken you to so many different types of events. At the moment, you're very focused on the Ultra, which we spoke about last time you were on. So Two Oceans Marathon, which was just on the weekend. You finished 5th place, which is absolutely incredible. Can you tell us a bit about your overall experience? If we go back a bit, how was your build-up for the race? What was your approach?
Yeah, my build-up was great. I ticked off every session that I had on my programme. Obviously, some sessions are harder than others, and sometimes you don't hit your paces or your targets, but it was really great to actually tick every single one off. I didn't have any kind of bumps in the road. It was like really plain sailing. I was in a really nice routine. I had an amazing group to train with, and I think all of that just helped to like have a really nice solid block.
You said you don't always hit the paces, which is obviously common for everyone. How do you kind of get over that and not dwell on a session that may not have gone to plan?
You can always figure out why a session didn't go to plan. So maybe it's you're tired, it's windy, you've had 2 sessions like too close together. So I always sit down and think, if I didn't hit the paces, why was that? And I'm never bothered about it because there's nothing you can do. I can't go back and do the session again.
Yeah.
So I tend to just reflect on the session, write up how my session went for my coach, which I do every day for him in the log that we do, and then I pretty much just move on to the next one.
Yeah, and I think, as you said, kind of bigger picture, you managed to tick off every session.
Yeah.
So that's kind of more important than, smashing a session 100%, but then digging yourself a hole and not being able to tick off every session.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So then what was your goal kind of going into the race? You did Two Oceans, was it for the first time last year?
Did it for the first time last year. This year, I wanted to get a better time than I did last year and just have a really solid race. My A race this year is Comrades, which is in 8 weeks' time. So I wanted to race well, but not completely destroy myself that I had to take 3 weeks off training. I actually ended up finishing a minute slower than last year, but it was a lot windier. And I actually think I had a better performance this year than I did last year. If you look at it on paper, you might think, yeah, but you came 2 places lower and you were a little bit slower. But the effort that I put in and how I executed the race and went out, I think it was better for me.
Yeah.
Which is quite cool.
Yeah, really cool. And with the wind, did you prepare for that before? Because you would have, I guess, had your ideal race scenario and how that was going to happen. Did you still approach it in the same way, or did you actually think, okay, I know there are going to be windy sections, we're going to have to adjust the effort here so I have a good race?
I knew that there was going to be wind and I probably should have adjusted the pace, but I didn't, and that's where I think I ended up hurting in the back half of the race. I still went off at the pace that I had intended to run with if there was no wind, which was 3 minutes 45 a K. So we went off at that pace and I stuck to that for the first 30K, which was my plan, which because of the wind, it was probably more the equivalent of like a 3:40, 3:35, which meant that I did kind of kick the arse out of it a little bit and wasn't as strong on the hills as I had hoped.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that I tried it. I had nothing to lose, so I'm glad I tried.
Yeah, you don't try, you don't know, because
Yeah.
I think your approach last year, which was great, and that was what I kind of tried to do this year, was, be super sensible at the start, so you have the energy to tackle the hills, but you nailed it last year doing that. So it's kind of like, what do you change this year, and take a few risks to see if they pay off?
Yeah, I think you found being super conservative in your first one, it just meant that it was very easy and very plain sailing, which was nice. So it was nice to actually take it up a level this year.
Were there any other challenges you faced during the race, and how did you tackle those?
I got a little bit of cramp from about 30K, but to be honest, I cramp in all the races that I do. I never cramp in training, I just cramp in racing, and I've kind of got to the point now where I can just suck it up and run through it. So as soon as that started happening, I was like, okay, cool, here we go. Yeah, I guess I couldn't go up the hills as hard as I wanted, but then I could go down quite hard. So I was like, well, fine then. I'm just going to take the gas off a little bit going up the final hill, which is called Constantia Neck, and then try and just send it on the downs.
Yeah.
But to be honest, there weren't, bar the weather, I didn't really have any issues in the race.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, cramp and being sore and tired is part of ultras, like that happens. So
well, that's what I feel like I'm learning, because I had the same where I was like, I'm cramping. And as you said, after the last hill at Constantia Neck, my plan was, let's go hard, but I physically couldn't because I don't get cramp in training either. So it's still quite like a foreign feeling to me. And you're of the experience where you can now kind of push through that pain knowing it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Whereas I felt like I kind of had to hold back on that pain just in case my legs weren't going to make it to the finish line. So I think, I just can take all the tips from you that you just get used to it.
Yeah, and it's really weird because you're like feeling all these things and you're just trying to shut your body off. Like everything hurts, but you're just like, nope, it's fine, just plow through.
Yeah, how do you approach it psychologically then when you kind of have those voices saying, it's because they're protecting you, they're kind of saying, slow down, stop, you're in pain. How do you kind of overcome that?
Just ignore it. Just be like, when am I eating? Just think of literally anything else. Like, when am I eating next? What gel am I taking? Because I alternate between different gels. And then like, okay, which one did I have last? Which one have I got next? What K marker am I at? When am I going to see my friends? So like, just trying to think about literally anything else.
Distract yourself. Yeah, and that leads me on to nutrition as well. So what was your nutrition approach during the race, kind of in the lead up as well, morning of? How did you approach nutrition as a whole?
So morning I had oats, which I have every day anyway, just with some honey and some apple juice and a couple of cups of tea. I then had 300 milligrams of caffeine about 45 minutes before the start. I had a gel 15 minutes before the start. And then throughout the race, every 20 minutes, I took a gel, alternating between the Morton 160s and the Spring Awesome Sauce. And then every time we had a water table, so we had 6 in total, I'd had some Morton 160 carb drink. So I would take a swig of that, and then I had water wherever I could along the course. So I was having about 120 grams of carbohydrate an hour, which I did pretty easily. One of my bottles was missing off one of the tables, but I had extra out on the course just in case that happened.
Yeah. Do you practice, because it feels like over the course of an ultra, having to take on so much fuel, it's sometimes hard to replicate that in training. So how do you approach kind of those long training runs where do you do it exactly as you will in the race?
Yeah, so long training runs I do, exactly that, exactly the same.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important for people to hear, because I think it's so common that on race day they're like, right, I need to take on all these gels and they've not practiced it, but you've got to train your gut.
Yeah, if you haven't practiced that in training, there's no way that you can jump up to like those amounts of carbohydrate. And that is like, I take like at the very high end of the scale. So I think it's also about finding your sweet spot in there. But when you're doing marathons, ultras, like you need to fuel your races. Just when people say they hit the wall, it's because they haven't fueled properly.
Oh, 100%. And I think it just takes one of those variables out where you're not thinking that you're feeling low on energy at any point. If you can stay consistent, and a big tip I always tell people is always take on fuel before you think you need it. Because I think a lot of people end up waiting like, oh, I feel a bit low on energy now, I'm going to take a gel, and that's too late.
Yeah.
So practicing it regularly. So then you obviously had a great race. What are you taking forward what wins are you taking from this race that you can kind of, take as a confidence boost for what's next? And then you mentioned a few struggles. Is there anything that you would change about your build up, or if you're doing the race next year, you do differently?
I think it's good to know that, nutrition wise, that's solid, that works. I've got my plan. So that's a nice win. I think, taking forward, if the weather is different, then I do need to back off the pace a little bit. So it is just having that flexibility. But sometimes I think when I have a plan in my head, I'm like, that's my plan and I need to stick to it. So being a little bit more flexible and going a little bit easier if there are harder conditions out there. So that's probably something that I would take into next year. But let's hope there's no wind. But it's Cape Town, so there's always wind.
Yeah, that wind was really tough.
You just got to assume it's going to be a windy race, and if it isn't, it's a bonus.
Yeah, and I think you said before, because I was like, I'm just going to tuck in with some men. You were like, it comes from all angles, like you can't hide. So Yeah.
And if you don't, like, I ran on my own, so I had no one to tuck in to. So then it's even harder. So you've got to, like, if you get a group, I think that's almost a bonus. But yeah, for me, I had like one or two guys around me, but no one I could hide behind, which was very irritating.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough when it's a massive headwind on a downhill as well.
Yeah.
You can't really go as fast as you want.
Yeah.
And then, so how did you celebrate? Because you've obviously been training super seriously. I know you're very, diligent with your training and practicing your early nights, early mornings, which is great, and how you have performed so well. So did you let your hair down after the race? Do you let yourself do that?
I did. We went to the pub straight afterwards so the race was on Saturday, so we went there, had a disgusting rumbler, which was just grim, which is like a beer with tequila and rum in it this time, as you know. Yeah. Not fun having to down that. And
very, very well done though for someone that doesn't really drink.
Oh, I drink twice a year, those rumblers after races. That's it.
Yeah.
So yeah, did that, and then I just went for burgers with Sean in the evening, and then came home, and I actually got to bed relatively early because we were getting up to go and watch the 21k the next day. So next day was back up at 5 to get out on the course and watch the guys for the 21, and then it was the 9-4 after party on Sunday, which was just ridiculous. So just danced from, I think we got there at like 3 till midnight,
Wow.
all just having like an awesome party.
I'm impressed your legs could dance for that long after the race. That is very impressive.
I did have a 2-hour nap before I went to the party, which I
Okay.
think was very much needed. If
Yeah.
I hadn't had that, there's no way I would have stayed up that late.
Very impressive.
So we all know how important good nutrition is to fuel our running performance. But one thing I get asked about a lot is how to fuel training sessions, because gels can be quite hard to tolerate and quite hard to get used to.
Especially as a lot of sports nutrition is heavily processed with artificial ingredients, not always that great on the stomach. But recently we've been trying Velo Forte and loving it, haven't we?
We have. Velo Forte is a natural way to fuel your performance. Their gut healthy bars, recovery shakes, and performance enhancing gels and chews are all made from real natural ingredients with no junk and additives, easier on your stomach and overall better for you.
And they taste delicious too. Chef-made recipes and so many incredible flavours. There's something for everyone, for every activity.
Favourite product?
My favourite product is the energy bar. Really good straight after a session or on the go.
I love this one. This is the recovery shake, and they just taste so delicious after a hard training session.
Thanks to Velo Forte for supporting this podcast. Head to veloforte.com and get 30% off by entering the code 5miles at checkout. That's the number 5 and the word miles.
Okay, so now let's go back a little bit to end of last year where you competed in the 50k World Champs. And if any of the listeners don't know, you are the 50k World Champion, which is very cool to say. So can you just tell us a bit about your experience of that race? Because the race was in India, so I can imagine it might be quite different conditions, and maybe just being a World Champs event, just a different type of race to the ones that you usually do.
Yeah, so India was everything that you would expect. Hot, humid, polluted, chaotic, just mad. It was just one of those that it's almost like a sensory overload when you're there. And it was just chaos. Like, we got to where the race venue was to go and try and recce the course the day before. So the course was 10 5k loops. Got there, they were like, no, there's no race here tomorrow. You're like, well, there is. And after about, I think it took us an hour and a half to eventually get the permissions to get in, because it was inside a university campus, to get inside there to go and recce the course. So it was just, from like the start, you're just like, oh, this is just mental. But I expected that. Like, I think when you're going to a country like that, you do expect chaos. Mm-hmm. To be honest, I pretty much locked myself away. I went and bought a rice cooker on the first day that I got there, and I just ate rice in my room and tried not to touch anything. I was so paranoid because you hear all these things, Delhi belly, getting sick, and it's not something that might happen, it's actually very likely. So yeah. I just tried to do everything I could before the race to limit anything like that happening, which meant I was very boring and just sat in my room.
Yeah, but you've got a job to do.
Fine.
You've got to
Exactly.
do it. Yeah.
And yeah, like that kind of racing, it is very different because it's it's almost like a time trial where it's a bit strategic. So I had a race plan. So again, I was going to try and go off at 3:45 a K, but then when the lead girls went off, they were running at 4 minutes a K. So I was like, well, I'm not going to run quicker than I have to. So I just sat behind them and just let the race unfold.
Yeah, and it was very, you've done a lot of hilly races recently, and this was it flat?
There was rolling hills in there, but like nothing compared to what I'm used to.
Yeah, so I think faster.
Yeah, I think the marathon girls, because normally 50K, you get a lot of people from the marathon stepping up. I think they found the hills hard because they're used to flat, faster courses, but coming from hilly ultras, going down to that, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Although by lap 10, it's bad.
Yeah. It's an ultra after all. It's going to get hard. So did you go in with the mindset that you wanted to win? Did you think you were capable of winning?
Yeah, I actually did, which was really weird. I kind of thought I would have the possibility of, I don't know why I thought that, because I was like, my marathon time was probably, I think, like 30th on the list. I wasn't ranked very highly, but I don't know, I just had this weird feeling that I could have a good race. I knew I'd done everything that I could to prepare, in terms of I'd gone to Dubai for 2 weeks before to train in the heat and humidity to acclimatise myself for the conditions, and I'd done a couple of big runs in those conditions, so I knew what to expect. My training block again had gone really well, so yeah, it was weird. Like, I've never gone into a race before feeling like that.
Do you think, I guess, a combination of you'd been training well and you'd prepared well, like you said, but also the fact that you'd had a really good year of racing anyway, you could kind of take that confidence forward into the race?
Yeah, probably. And yeah, I don't know. It was just a very weird feeling, the whole experience.
Yeah, well, it paid off and you won. And so then coming into 2024, do you feel like that gave you an extra kind of boost in confidence of what you might be able to achieve this year, and kind of carried that through into your training? Or do you feel like that kind of self-belief has always been there?
I think every race you do, you get a little bit more confident in your abilities, so you start off in your first marathon. My first marathon actually was 10 years ago at London, and I went off way too hard and died, and it was awful, but you finish that race with that little bit of confidence in terms of like, oh, I can finish a marathon, I just need to learn how to behave. And then every time you do a race, you kind of add something else into the mix. And yeah, definitely, like, last year was a perfect year for me. If someone told me I could never run again after last year, I think I'd be very content to be like, cool, that was great. So yeah, it's nice to have that confidence in my ability to be like, cool, I can race these girls who are amazing and who we kind of put on a pedestal and be like, oh my God, I'm nowhere near them. But actually, you're slowly climbing that ladder and getting a little bit closer.
Yeah, and I've always said, tell yourself you belong there. If those girls can do it, then like, why can't anyone else? They've come from climbing the ladder as well. So
exactly, we've all got 2 legs.
Simple as that.
None of them have got the advantage of 3. So.
I love that. So then what's next? You said 8 weeks till Comrades.
Yeah.
Assume that's your next goal. It's your A goal. What is your plan for that? You came 3rd last year. Are you trying to better that? Or is it a time?
Yeah, it's always really hard, I think, to put a goal on what position you want to come, because you don't know how the other girls are going to race. But in terms of time, the Comrades up record is 5:58, and I would really want to try and get as near to that record as possible. So I think on paper, I can run those paces. So yeah, we just have to see. So that's my main goal, to try and get as near to the up record time as I can.
Okay, and for people that maybe don't know the race, so can you explain a bit? Each year it changes between down and up?
Yeah, so it starts, this year it's actually starting in Durban and it's going up to Pietermaritzburg. It's, I think, 87 kilometres this year. On the up, it's got 1,600 metres of elevation climbing, but it also has 1,000 metres of descent. So even when everyone thinks, oh, it's just up, you are actually descending quite a lot in that race as well. And then it alternates. So next year we'll go from Pietermaritzburg to Durban, and it will be 1,600 downhill, but still 1,000 uphill. They are 2 very, very different races. Like, everyone thinks it's the same race, but it's not. I've never actually had a good up run, so it's going to be interesting. Hopefully I'm going to take quite a bit of time off my time. But yeah, we'll see. But it's also the biggest and oldest ultramarathon in the world. You get about 20,000 people lining up on the start line, it's just ridiculous. And I think
like 5 in the morning as well.
Yeah, it's mad. It's just, and people supporting the whole way. There is nothing else like it anywhere in the world.
Yeah, awesome. It's definitely on my list for 1 year. We'll see. Take it slow. And what else do you have your eyes on? I mean,
so after that, I'm going to have a little break, and then I'm going to do Valencia Marathon in December. Try and get a nice, quick marathon time. That is the 100k world champs this year, but it's in India, so I don't want to go back and do that.
It's on the same course.
No. I'm like, literally anywhere else I would be wanting to go, but yeah, I don't think it's for me. So yeah, it would be cool to actually try and do a marathon and hopefully get a marathon PB. And I think Valencia is probably one of the best courses in the world to like time trial and go for a fast time.
Yeah, when was the last time you did a marathon?
Seville in 2022. I've done loads of marathons in between, but they've been like training runs for Comrades. So yeah, proper marathon, was 2 years ago now.
Wow, okay. So, and you've had some very good races in between, so you're due a very good marathon time, hopefully. Yeah, we'll see. It's so exciting. Okay, so the ultra world, I think it seems like more and more people now are kind of getting interested, me included. It's a very different community and almost different sport to your regular track and field, building up, even up to the marathon. So for people that are interested, and those that are listening probably very inspired by your journey as well, what tips would you give someone that wants to do their first ultra marathon? So if we start with, say, training tips, is the approach to training very different from, say, marathon training?
So it depends. So an ultra is basically anything over a marathon, and that spreads out across a massive range. So I think, as you found, like training for Two Oceans, which is 56k, training for a 50k, that kind of ballpark, I would say, is the same as marathon training. You need to throw in some hills if your course is hilly, but essentially you can get away with those distances on marathon training. As you go further up the distances, it's nothing too crazy. Like, even for Comrades, my longest run is going to have been Two Oceans, 56k. I won't do anything longer than that in the build-up. It's more about just nailing your nutrition more, because it's more mental. If you can run for 3 hours, you can run for 6 hours.
That blows my mind.
Yeah. And I don't think you need to do like crazy big volumes. It's just having, like the confidence that you can get through it. But also, like, if you're then moving up to things like 100 milers, multi-day ultras, the training is different for that, because you actually do need to go out for a lot longer, and potentially, if you're going to be out for 2 days, you might have to do back-to-back long runs to build that strength and stuff in your legs. If you're starting off, I think sometimes people are like, I'm going to do an ultra, I'm going to do a 100 miler. Like, you don't need to start at a 100 miler. There are 50k races out there, and I would start at that side of the scale and then slowly build up over time. It's not a race. And then almost like find your sweet spot. So it might be like you try 100k and you're like, well, actually I don't quite like that distance, I'm going to go back to 50s, and that's where I'm going to focus.
Yeah. And okay, what about strength training? Because you're a very big advocate for strength training.
Yeah, so I think strength is really important. It gives you that ceiling where if you are strong, you can put your body through a lot more in these races. And I think, like, I've bounced back from this race very quickly. My legs are fine today, which actually blows my mind, like only 4 days after the race. And I do think a massive component of that is doing strength, like every single week. Not only does it keep injuries away, it makes you faster, it recruits more muscle fibers. There's so many benefits to it. And like, I know it's boring and I know people would rather be out there running, but when you get injured, you're going to be stuck in a gym. So that's why I made like my strength and conditioning for runners program, because it doesn't have to be complicated and you don't actually have to do loads. When you're starting off, you do your 1 session a week, you consistently do it. And then once you get into the habit of doing that once a week, every week for a few months, you can then start adding in extra sessions. But yeah, I think it's a game changer, and it means you don't have to run as much. So
yeah, well, there you go. And I mean, just to mention again, your strength conditioning and yoga for runners is such a great tool, because it you're not just going into a gym looking around like, what do I do, kind of making it up on your own, and that's not motivating. If you've got a tool there where you can follow a plan, then it's just easier to tick something off, and
I try and make everything like runner specific, everything is runner specific. Like when we're running, a lot of the stuff that we're doing is single leg. You need to have a really strong core because that's what's holding everything together. So a lot of the components I look at are single leg and core, but then also, just doing things that are going to make us quicker and just take that thinking out of it for you. So all you have to do is press play.
Yeah. I always think you have to do things that are a bit uncomfortable or things you don't love in order to get better.
Yeah.
Another one of those things can also be nutrition. So can you also just talk about, I know you scream about it a lot, the importance of fueling really well, and even doing that, it can be easy to eat well, but it can also be hard at times, when you have to eat super early in the morning or straight after a session when you don't necessarily feel hungry. What are your views on fueling?
Yeah, so fueling for me is a non-negotiable. Like it is the thing that is going to help you run better and recover better. And you need to fuel your body. And, I have this with people all the time where they're like, oh, well, I don't want to eat breakfast first thing in the morning before I go and do a session. Like, how do you do? Like, I don't enjoy sitting there at 5 o'clock in the morning eating a bowl of porridge, but I know if I don't, I'm not going to be able to run quickly. And also it's the same about, finding the right distance. It's finding the right food. So like a bowl of porridge might not work for you, but toast and jam might. You might even like a gel is going to work. Like just find something that works for you, but before a session it needs to be high carbohydrate. So the sugar is what is going to fuel your session. So porridge, toast, fruit, a gel, like just have something, but it is a game changer. Like the days of saying that you're doing fasted runs are going to benefit your running, like the research has proved that is 100% not true. So just don't do it, because you're also going to just dig yourself into a hole that is going to be very difficult to get out of if you end up in an energy deficit. Fueling in sessions, if your session is over 90 minutes, you need to fuel for it. So the general guidelines is if it's about 90 minutes, you want 30 grams of carbohydrate. If it's about 2 hours, you want 60 grams of carbohydrate an hour. And if it's 3 hours, you need about 90 plus. But that's starting that amount from the beginning. And then fueling afterwards, it's getting in your carbohydrate and protein as soon as possible. So 4-to-1, carbohydrate to protein. Some really easy things to do are chocolate milk. It's a really good recovery drink. It's got the right amount of carbohydrates, fats and proteins in it. I tend to have chocolate milk or a hot chocolate after every run. You can have a smoothie, which is also a great way to get in extra veggies. You can chuck some protein powder in there and loads of fruit for the carbs. Or if you can get a meal in straight away within 30 minutes, just go and have a meal. So I'll do that sometimes if I know I'm going for breakfast. I'll plan a run so it finishes and I can go straight to having brunch. But I think those 3 things are the most important, but then also fueling throughout the day. And if you've got a big session the next day, you need to fuel properly the night before as well. So again, high carbohydrate availability, so your body is ready to run, and you're just setting yourself up for success. Like for me, nutrition is a really easy win.
Yeah,
it's in your control by eating.
Yeah, exactly. And would you say there's any difference just in training with nutrition between marathon and ultra, or is it just the same kind of holistic approach to both?
I think it's the same, but obviously as your runs get longer, you need to fuel them a little bit more. I tend to like day to day, we'll have breakfast, lunch and dinner, and then I'll have like a mid-morning snack, an afternoon snack and something just before I go to bed. So I try and like spread meals out throughout the day, so your blood sugar's like a little bit more stable and your metabolism's working all the time.
Yeah, I think it's kind of common sense as well. If your training's increasing, you need to increase the fuel as well.
Exactly. And I think a mistake that some people make as well is that if they've got an easy day of training, they think, oh, well, I don't need to eat as much today because I'm not training as much. But actually, you do need to eat as much because you've had a hard session the day before, or you might have a hard session the next day. So I think it's about, you actually need to fuel consistently all the time. And then when you have those really big sessions, you're fueling during that session to give you that extra energy that you need.
Yeah, and your body doesn't have like a day clock. It doesn't think, okay, today is 24 hours where I'm not doing as much movement. It's looking at over, you know, days, weeks, months, you know. So yeah, very important. And then I guess psychological tips. So I know you've said, you know, in Two Oceans, you feel pain, block it out, distract yourself. Are there any other tips you take, you know, just in training in general and in racing?
So before a race, I'll always sit down and draw out a race plan. So I'll like either draw the race course or the race profile, and then I'll put everything on there to do with my race. So like, when am I going to fuel? When am I going to see support crew? What paces do I want to go at? How do I want to structure the race? And I feel like for me, that gets me into the mindset of the race. And I can also think about when I think parts of the course are going to be tough. So then when they are tough, it's not a surprise.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest thing that I do. And then also, just kind of like what we said earlier, if you have a bad session or a tough session, figure out why and then move on. Like, there's nothing you can do about those past ones. But yeah, I try not to dive like too much into the psychology side of it, but you know, writing out your race plan, figuring it out, for me, that's a really good way to get into the mindset of the race and know what your goal, your game plan is on the day.
Yeah, I really like the one of just so nothing's a surprise.
Yeah.
I think that's so important, is just, you know, almost visualizing each part of the course and what you think is going to be tough, and if you're going to feel a certain thing, how you're going to approach it. So when that thing comes, you're like, okay, I've planned for this.
Yeah.
And usually then it's not as bad as you think it's going to be.
Yeah. Like if you know you struggle on hills, you can be like, okay, I'm going to back it off a little bit. That hill's going to be hard, but there's a really nice downhill afterwards where I can make up a bit of time. Mm-hmm. So little things like that. So then you're like, when you're going up the hill and it's tough, you're like, oh, it's okay. I knew it was going to be tough. It's fine, but there's a downhill coming.
Yeah.
So yeah, just balancing it out a little bit. And for me, I don't know about you, but I was just really looking forward to the cheer zone the whole way through the race. With like 2K to go, there's a massive cheer zone in Two Oceans. So for me, it was always having that to look forward to.
Yeah.
Because I knew it was going to give me a massive boost in the race.
Yeah, I think for me, because I'd never run the course before, what was so helpful was the number of people that I knew that had done it, which I felt so grateful for. They had told me about every single section of the race, so nothing came as a surprise. I was expecting all of it, and I think that helped break it down as well. And you're not on the start line thinking, I'm going to be running for like up to 4 hours.
Yeah.
You're kind of like, I'll just approach each section as it comes. So yeah, having those bits to look forward to is so helpful as well. Last bit on ultras, what do you think is the hardest thing about kind of approaching the ultra distance?
I think it's going into the unknown, because in your training, you're never going to go to the distance that you're going to race. So it's just having the confidence that your accumulative load of training is going to get you through it. So I think a lot of people I coach and stuff, they're like, yeah, but my longest run is 4 hours and I'm going to be racing for 8. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but you will be fine. So I think it's just having the confidence that you don't need to go up to the distance. You are going into the unknown, but you'll be fine.
Do you find that you have people that you coach where you have to hold them back from actually just kind of proving to themselves that they can do the distance? They're going to go out for a crazy long run to just prove to themselves that, like, I can do this.
Yeah, and people do that. I'm like, what are you doing? I've had someone do that the week before a race, go and do the actual distance, which obviously is completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
But, you know, I guess everyone approaches things in different ways, but it's just about, that's how so many people train. We've all got through it. We've all done it that way.
Yeah.
Like, it works.
Yeah, it is.
I don't know how it works, but it works. So just trust that you don't need to go up to, and it's weird because when you're racing a 5K, a half marathon, 10K, you do the distance in training a lot. When you go to a marathon, probably the nearest you'll get is 22 miles. And then when you get to the ultras, you almost are going to half of the distance. So it's really weird how it works, but it's because those big long runs take so much more out of you. Like, you can recover from a 5K very easily. Recovering from 50K takes a bit more time.
Yeah, if you did that in the middle of training, then you're going to be resting for 2 weeks.
Yeah, you're just going to dig yourself into a hole.
Yeah, it is interesting how everyone's mind works differently, because I felt like for me, I was not worried about the distance at all. I felt like I had confidence from some of the longer sessions and runs and training where I wasn't worried about
how long it was going to be. It was, I think for this one, it was more the hills and how my legs were going to respond, because living in London, it's sometimes a little bit hard to replicate the terrain here. So yeah, that was definitely the thing for me, but lots to work on.
And you smashed it, so.
Oh, thank you. Well, yeah. Hopefully next year I'll be even closer to you. Sure. My inspiration. Okay, so then last thing is, you've clearly achieved so much in a short space of time, but what is your high five me moment? And that doesn't need to be, you know, even in the last year, it might be, but in your whole career, a moment that you would give yourself a high five.
I think Comrades last year, I raced exactly how I wanted to. Like, I went out hard, I responded to the race, I really struggled, but for the first time, I came through like a really tough patch and came out the other side. And yeah, like that's the first time I've ever managed to do that in a race. And yeah, it was really special. I never thought, obviously you want to run as quickly as I did. Like in my head, I thought that I could, but sometimes you still don't quite believe it until you do it. So yeah, Comrades last year.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. And I hope you can replicate it on the up this year.
Fingers crossed.
Oh, you'll be great. Thank you so much, Carla, for answering all those questions. And again, huge congratulations on your performance. I'm really looking forward to seeing how Comrades goes and Valencia later in the year.
Thanks, and see you at Comrades one day.